If Aurion Prime was the beating heart of interspecies peace, then it was also the place where covert wars were the cruelest. The planet gleamed with massive glass towers, spiral plazas, and thousands of symbols from countless great and small civilizations clashing and vying for influence. Here, every smiling handshake could conceal a cold war that had dragged on for decades beneath the surface. Orien Trask had never imagined that he would one day set foot in the very center of this world, much less be assigned to such a dangerous mission, serving as the bodyguard to a noblewoman of the Lysari, a woman the media often called the Silver Rose of Orien. Distant, icy, with a gaze that could make anyone feel stripped bare to the bone. Orien arrived on Orien during a drizzle tinted with faint purple. The memories of war, blood, and fallen comrades were forever left behind at the frontiers, but now he, an Earthman whose resume was an odd blend of special forces infantry and diplomatic security, had been hired through an intermediary, given only one uncompromising directive: protect Aestra Valyn at all costs, allow not a single scandal, even if it means facing the shadowy forces of all three great alliances. The Velos Hotel, where the Valyn family's delegation was temporarily based, was a towering structure of glass, reflected on the main square below. The entrance to Aestra's suite was guarded by biological sensor checkpoints, and with each step through those scanners, Orien felt the icy stares of the Lysari. Tall, with hair like silver lavender light, skin shimmering as if misted over, voices perfectly enunciated but so softly inflected that even air itself seemed to tremble. He was no stranger to those disdainful stares, the suspicion reserved for a lowly human, especially when his role was merely that of a contract bodyguard, with no allegiance strong enough to command respect. Aestra Valyn first appeared beneath the crystal dome of the main hall, surrounded by diplomats, attendants, and advisors. She glided as if on air, every gesture precise and distant, her silvery gray eyes drifting coolly over every face until they met Orien's. In that instant, two currents of consciousness collided, one as cold as ice, one a searing flame held tightly in check. "You're the Earth bodyguard they sent." Her voice was soft as silk but carried undeniable weight, her gaze sweeping from his head to his toes, openly sizing him up with a hint of contempt. Orien's lips curled in a subtle, unyielding smirk. He stood straight, refusing to bow. "Yes, my lady, but I'd imagine Earthman isn't the worst resume in the Valyn recruitment files." A cold laugh rang out from behind Aestra, her chief advisor shaking his head in disapproval, but she waved them all away with a casual gesture. She took a step closer, standing nearer to Orien than protocol required, close enough that only he could hear but also close enough for him to catch the chill, metallic scent of Lysari hair and skin. "If your job is just to stand guard at the door, you'll fail quickly," she whispered, lips curved in a half-smile. "Orien Prime has many things better left unobserved." Orien held his ground, his gaze locked to hers, breath steady. "I'm paid to notice everything, especially what others try to hide. If you don't like it, you can request a replacement right now." Her eyes flashed with a rare glimmer of interest. "Blunt, aren't you? Very well, I accept the challenge. But remember, here, every mistake is paid for in blood." They stared at each other like two blades drawn from their scabbards. The Lysari attendants muttered in discomfort, but Aestra didn't care. She turned on her heel, her long silver hair brushing his shoulder, carrying with it a wave of frigid air. He understood. The game had begun, and any lapse in vigilance would turn him from hunter to prey. The first days working beside Aestra were like walking a tightrope strung between skyscrapers, an ever-present sense of imbalance, every step taken with extreme caution, not only for the rigid rules of engagement, but for the lurking threats from factions waiting for any excuse to shatter the fragile alliance. Orien was given a private room next to Aestra's, a rare privilege for a bodyguard without any blood tie. At night, the corridor glowed with pale lavender light, and each patrol brought him past icy faces and whispered Lysari words he barely understood. The sensation of being watched, judged, and even envied grew more intense with each passing day. Yet, if anything, it only hardened Orien's resolve. He was no stranger to war zones. Political intrigue did not scare him. He observed, memorized, and always maintained the necessary distance with Aestra, though at times his masculine instincts were tested by her frigid beauty and her gaze, half challenge, half mockery. One late night, while checking the security systems, he heard a strange sound from within Aestra's glass-walled room. Without hesitation, Orien used his access to open the door, only to find her curled up by the window, silver hair cascading down her back, her pose a mixture of melancholy and pride as she gazed at the city glowing with neon lights in the distance. "My lady, is something keeping you up?" He kept his tone polite but not overly distant, standing precisely 1 meter away, as all well-trained bodyguards should. Aestra didn't look at him, just let out a faint, sardonic smile. "On this planet, everyone lies awake with worries. You're naive if you think a locked door will keep you safe." Orien leaned against the wall, eyes never leaving her. "I don't trust locks. I trust my survival instincts, and I know that if you're ever in danger, I'll be the first to stand in the way." She chuckled, a real laugh this time, low and brief, as if even she didn't believe in such reassurances. "You don't know what you're up against, Orien Trask." "I don't need to know everything," he replied. "I just know the only reason I'm here is to make sure nothing happens to you. If you want me gone, just say the word." She shook her head and for the first time met his eyes. Her silver gaze sparkled like a midnight lake under the moonlight. "Aren't you afraid of me?" Orien shrugged. "I fear many things, but not the person I've been hired to protect." Aestra rose, moving closer. Now the distance between them was just a touch. In that moment the air seemed to thicken. She placed her hand on the door behind him, eyes never leaving his face. "Many think Lysari like us are just pretty shells. The truth is, beneath the surface, we're nothing like humans in any way." "That's what makes me curious," Orien answered, voice low, unwavering. "What's inside that shell that keeps you ready to bare your claws at anyone who gets close?" She smirked. "Perhaps you wouldn't want to know. Perhaps I'd like to be the first to find out." A faint static seemed to sizzle between them as their eyes locked. After a long pause, Aestra slowly stepped back, lips pressed into a cryptic smile. "Good night, Orien Trask. Don't let anyone into my room, not even yourself." He nodded, but as she disappeared into the darkness, he couldn't stop himself from watching the slender figure until the door closed behind her. The next morning, a major diplomatic meeting was held on the hotel's top floor. Orien accompanied Aestra, watching her handle the delegates from other worlds. Her eyes glacial, her words razor-sharp, every smile a velvet-trapped dagger. In the middle of the meeting, a minor incident broke out. A Graner delegate suddenly hurled a glass of wine at the Lysari table, clearly trying to provoke. Orien instantly shielded Aestra, pulling her from harm's way in a heartbeat, his hand gripping her wrist, his body blocking hers from the incoming threat. For a moment time stood still. Her breath ghosted across his cheek, their heartbeats thudding wildly in sync. Aestra froze, silver eyes wide, surprised, a bit angry, and for a split second unmistakably flustered. "Did you just save me or try to take advantage?" she whispered, her lips barely an inch from his ear. Orien replied evenly, "Just doing my job, but if you prefer to see it differently, I won't stop you." She didn't pull her hand away at once, and in that fleeting instant Orien felt the touch. A simple grip, a brush of shoulders, changed the temperature between them. Some strange energy pulsed beneath Lysari's skin, rippling up his arm, a mix of cold and fire, making him feel something more primal than biology, something closer to instinct. She withdrew her hand, spun away, mask cold once more. "Next time remember I don't need saving," she murmured, just loud enough for him alone. But that look, no longer just challenge, but something broken, fragile, a tiny spark darting across the ice. Orien didn't reply, but he knew. The battle of power and emotion had truly begun. That night, Orien stayed awake, rechecking the entire security system. The incident at the meeting was off. Someone was targeting Aestra. His battle-hardened instincts warned. There would be more trouble tonight. Indeed, around 2 in the morning, a strange sound came from the rooftop. Orien snapped into alert mode, weapon concealed in his jacket, rushing upstairs, just in time to spot a shadow slipping in through the service door. Aestra was already there, standing alone in the dark, silver hair tousled by the wind. As the intruder approached her, Orien struck, disabling him with swift, silent efficiency. She watched him without speaking, her eyes unfathomable. "I thought I told you not to enter my room at night," she said quietly, but the coldness was gone. Orien exhaled, blood from his sleeve still warm. "I promise to protect you, even if I have to break every rule." She gazed into his eyes, silent, only nodding. For the first time, Orien saw something achingly human in her eyes: gratitude, hesitation, the vulnerability of someone long accustomed to loneliness and control. "Thank you," she whispered so softly before quickly turning away. But Orien knew, from now on, an invisible bond had begun to form between them, no matter how much both tried to deny it. Beneath the pale light of dawn, Orien stood alone atop the crystal dome, quietly watching the alien city below. Somewhere deep inside, he realized, this time, he was more than a bodyguard. He was the only one who might truly understand, and perhaps melt, the thick ice Aestra Valyn used to shield herself from the world. And he knew that what had just begun on Aurion Prime could not end here. Aurion Prime, 3 days after the failed attack. The tense atmosphere still gripped every high floor of the Velos Hotel. That incident had caused the security systems to tighten almost to suffocation. But beneath those layers of control, there were currents of emotion and primal instinct swirling between Orien and Aestra, far more unpredictable than any technology could restrain. Orien's sleepless nights multiplied, haunted by swirling questions about safety, the shadows lurking behind the scenes, and, undeniably, about the Lysari woman who invaded his mind with brutal persistence, no matter how hard he tried to suppress her presence. That fateful night began with an unforecasted cold storm sweeping across Aurion Prime. The hotel grounds were nearly frozen, the streetlights flickering a trembling blue, droplets of dew forming tiny icicles on the window panes. Orien had just finished his final security round, and was about to catch up on sleep when he received an emergency signal from Aestra's room. Her door lock was malfunctioning, the biometric code not matching her personal signature. He rushed over, his heart pounding not just from duty but from a wordless dread. The biometric system flashed error, but through the fogged glass he saw Aestra leaning against her desk, one hand gripping the chair, breath quickened, face pale beneath the dim light. "What's wrong?" Orien forced the door open, faster than any Lysari guard's reflexes could have matched. Aestra turned, silver hair disheveled, her eyes glistening, her whole body trembling in a strange fever. I can't control it. Maybe toxins or, I don't know, I feel like I'm burning from the inside out." Her voice was hoarse, her breath thin as mist. Orien immediately checked her wrist, discovering her temperature was rising fast, her pulse erratic. "Did anyone slip something into your drink today?" Aestra shook her head, retreating toward the desk, her body clearly shaking. "No, I've been careful, it's just, my body has never reacted like this before." She bit her lip, her cheeks an unusual blush, her gaze no longer icy but lost, panicked, and, unexpectedly, hungry. He moved to call for medical, but she clutched his wrist, her nails digging into his skin. Don't let anyone in. If this is a biological change, no one can witness it." In that moment, Aestra's face shifted from fear to defiance, then almost melted. The Lysari body, normally the paragon of emotional control, now trembled, weak and exposed, in front of a mere human. Orien. She said his name for the first time without command or derision. He saw the fragility and despair flicker in her silver eyes. Her skin was growing hotter by the second, her breathing increasingly urgent. No longer separating duty from instinct, he gently pulled her to sit on the bed, wrapped a thick blanket around her shoulders, and pressed his palm to her forehead. Her skin burned as if fire raged just beneath the surface. Aestra looked at him, eyes laced with fear and a craving she could no longer hide. "You don't understand. Lysari aren't allowed to let emotions go out of control, but now I can't stop it. There's something in the air, in my blood, in." She didn't finish, but her weakened hand was already clutching his shirt, lips trembling. Orien, who had survived dozens of battles and believed himself immune to any temptation, found himself powerless. In that room between the cold storm outside and the heat burning inside, only their heavy breaths and a string pulled taut by primal need remained. He sat beside her, hand gently on her shoulder, whispering, "What do you want me to do?" Aestra closed her eyes, lashes trembling. "Don't ask, just don't leave me." She pulled him closer, their breaths merging in the fleeting quiet before all reason vanished. Orien did not kiss her immediately. He paused, searching her eyes once more to be sure, and found no denial, no pride. Only a Lysari woman betrayed by her own feelings and biology, desperate to be freed, to be loved. He bent down, lips brushing her forehead, her cheek, pausing at the corner of her mouth. She didn't flinch, her lips trembled, the strange scent of Lysari skin mixing with the warmth of her breath and the salt of tears. This time, Aestra was the one to reach for him. She drew him in, their mouths meeting in a kiss not loud or frantic but compressed, as if the whole world shrank into this instant. The rain outside merged with the rising rhythm of breath within the room. They fell onto the cool sheets, hands grasping, clothes pulled away, skin pressed against skin. Her body temperature soared, silver skin tinged with flushed pink, her eyes opening and closing, afraid yet savoring. Orien was never rough, but in this moment his gentleness was threaded with masculine need, turning every touch feverish. His hand traced the curves of her body, feeling the difference between Lysari and human, cool skin outside, fire underneath. Aestra's low moan escaped her throat, a final confession from someone who had abandoned all defenses. Aestra pulled him lower, her mouth grazing his neck, voice choked with emotion. "If anyone finds out, we'll both die." Orien did not reply, only held her tighter. "Then let this be our last secret, ours alone." Emotion surged, a tidal wave, two bodies tangled together, lost in a symphony of sweat, tears, and longing. Every touch, every breath seemed to engrave something deeper than lust into their flesh, a surrender to instinct, the call of life itself. They loved each other in silence, not a single cry loud enough for the world to hear, only broken sounds, ragged breaths, and whispered prayers. At the peak, Aestra dug her fingers into Orien's back, her body trembling violently, flashes of silver light dancing along her skin, proof that her Lysari instincts had surrendered utterly to a human. Afterward, Aestra curled into Orien's chest, her slender shoulders shivering, part exhaustion, part fear of herself. I'm not supposed to do this. I'm Valyn, I must keep my blood pure." Her voice cracked in the darkness, a confession. Orien pulled her closer, fingers stroking her cold hair. "If this is a sin, I'll bear it with you, but I don't think what we feel is wrong." Aestra said nothing, only burrowed deeper into his arms. Inside her, emotions surged violently. For the first time, she felt small and weak, just like any ordinary person. But for the first time, she felt safe, sheltered by someone who did not belong to her world. Morning came. A shrill alarm rang in the hallway, jerking Orien awake before sunrise. He hurriedly dressed. Aestra was already ready, her face returned to icy calm, only her eyes betraying a fleeting gentleness. "Forget last night, Orien," she said quietly, her tone steady as usual. "Just this once. No one must know." He nodded, half in earnest, half in regret. "I won't tell anyone, not even myself." She smiled faintly, a smile only he could see. Then Aestra opened the door and strode into the hallway, where Sereth Valyn, her mother, was waiting, her gaze cutting through every shadow like a laser. "Let's go, Orien. The new day begins." Her voice was decisive, but Orien knew, no matter how well they hid it, the consequences of this night would never stay buried. Early morning on Aurion Prime, pale violet mist circled the crystal domes. Even at dawn, the atmosphere inside the Velos Hotel felt heavy, as if an invisible pressure was bearing down on everything. News of the previous night's attack had been suppressed, but beneath that surface calm, currents of power, intrigue, and a growing secret pulsed quietly, swelling in the silence. Orien Trask had spent a sleepless night, not because of external dangers, but because of the storm of emotions that would not die down within him about Aestra Valyn. That fateful night replayed endlessly in his mind. Flesh entwined, bewildered glances, trembling nerves, and an intense yearning that would not fade. It was as if he had stepped across a line from which he could never return, knowing that everything to come would be far more complicated than before. As Orien was straightening his uniform, the door suddenly swung open. Not Aestra, but Sereth Valyn, Aestra's mother, the matriarch of House Valyn, an embodiment of cold authority whose very presence radiated lethal danger. She didn't knock or announce herself. Her deep blue eyes, ringed with silver frost, swept the room like a scanning field. Her footsteps were light, gliding over the floor, yet each sound carried a weight that made the entire space feel suffocating. "You are Orien Trask." Her voice was steady, each word measured, not a question but a statement. Orien nodded, his face calm. "Yes, Matriarch. I am responsible for Aestra's safety during the delegation's stay on Orien." She drew closer, her gaze inspecting him like a predator evaluating its prey. "An Earthman," she repeated, lips curling in a faint smile. "I've read your dossier, 8 campaigns survived, 3 wounds, hostage rescue from the Zynex. Interesting, but those achievements mean nothing here." Orien didn't avert his eyes. "I'm not here to impress. I'm here to protect your daughter as contracted." Sereth came so near that he could smell the strange fragrance of her platinum hair. "So, what will you do when the threat doesn't come from outside, but from within this very room?" Orien realized that in her eyes there was more than probing. There was also a glint. Was it a warning, a threat, or even a challenge? He kept his tone even. "If the matriarch has concerns, please say them plainly." Her lips twisted. "Some things cannot be said openly, Orien Trask. For instance, when a bodyguard exceeds his role." That line cut through Orien's defenses like a cold knife. He showed no reaction, but he understood. She knew, or at least suspected, what had happened the night before. Aestra appeared in the doorway, face pale, her eyes blazing with suppressed fear and anger. She hurried forward to stand between Orien and her mother, voice cold but trembling. "Mother, I think my personal affairs do not require outside interference." Sereth eyed her daughter, eyes narrowing, then switched to a tone of false gentleness. "Aestra, you know every action you take shapes House Valyn's future. Some secrets can't be hidden forever, especially when they threaten our bloodline." Aestra frowned slightly, her eyes darting to Orien as if in a silent plea or a warning, but Sereth saw it all. "Remember, you're not just an heir, you are the very foundation of Velari's future. Every mistake has a price." Orien was silent, but inside, turmoil churned. He understood. She didn't need proof to turn suspicion into a crime, and the greatest crime in this world was to let emotion dictate choice. At the same time, Aestra herself felt something was changing within her. The first symptoms crept in quietly: racing heart, erratic body temperature, dizziness, and a primal fear she had never known. For centuries, no Lysari had ever been pregnant with another species. It was considered genetically impossible, or worse, an absolute taboo. Alone in her room, Aestra secretly scanned herself with her personal medical device. The readings appeared: increased hormones, altered cells, a strange genetic signal, all pointed to an impossible truth. She was pregnant, and the blood inside her was not purely Lysari. A wave of shock crashed over her, fear mingled with vertigo. Was this just a machine's error, or was it a sentence for her entire future? Her mother's warnings, the strict laws of purity, and the terror of hybrids, once erased from Lysari history, all swirled in her mind. At that moment the door opened. Orien entered, immediately noticing the change in her demeanor. "What's wrong?" He moved closer, worry in his eyes, though he still kept a safe distance, even wary of himself. Aestra looked at him, her gaze lost, lips trembling as if she was about to cry but couldn't. "Orien, if you knew a secret that could destroy us both, what would you do?" He squeezed her shoulders gently, whispering, "I'll keep it with you, or face it together, but you need to tell me what's happening." She handed him the scanner, the screen flashing two ominous lines. Pregnancy detected, genetic anomaly. Human/Lysari hybrid. For a moment all sound faded. Orien looked at Aestra, his hand shaking, not out of fear but because of the magnitude of what this meant. How is this possible?" Aestra let out a bitter laugh, tears rolling down her cheeks. "I don't know. I only know that if this is discovered, we'll both be torn apart. The child will never be allowed to exist." Orien embraced her tightly, letting her tears soak into his shirt. He whispered, "I won't let that happen, even if I have to face all of Aurion Prime." She buried her face in his chest, sobbing as she'd never dared before. For the first time, all her walls fell. They clung to each other, not only out of passion but also out of despair and longing for refuge. Orien kissed her forehead, her eyelids, her lips, soft but fierce, as if to engrave this moment deep into their bones. Between kisses and whispered words, Aestra murmured, "If my mother finds out, she'll destroy everything. The baby, me, and you too." Orien gazed into her eyes, his own alight. "Then we won't let her find out. And if she does, we won't let her control us." Outside, Sereth Valyn kept a watchful eye on everything. She had installed biological monitors throughout the hotel floor, checking every anomaly, and quickly spotted changes in her daughter. With a secret command, she extracted Aestra's personal medical data. The result did not surprise her, but brought a cold smile to her lips. She quietly summoned a secret meeting with key members of the Lysari Council, but before that, she decided there had to be a private conversation with Orien. That night, as Aestra drifted in and out of uneasy sleep, Orien was summoned to Sereth's private chamber. The room was icy, blue-white lights shining on glass walls etched with Valyn's ancient sigils. Sereth sat on a high-backed chair, legs crossed, holding a glass of blue liquor, her eyes blazing, cutting through all of Orien's defenses. "Who do you think you are, Orien Trask?" Her voice was hoarse and sweet, yet full of menace. "Do you realize that with a single order, you could vanish from Orien, and no one would even remember your name?" Orien did not flinch, only replied, "If you wanted me gone, you'd have done it already. I believe you called me here to test me, or to bargain." Sereth's laugh was like shattering glass. "You're clever. I don't need a brave bodyguard. I need a pawn who knows where his loyalties should lie." Orien replied, "My loyalty is with Aestra, not rotten laws. If you want to control her, I'll be the first to stand in your way." Sereth arched an eyebrow, then suddenly stood, approaching him closely. "Do you know why Lysari have always kept power? Because we never let emotions rule us. What have you done to my daughter, or rather, what have you done to the Valyn bloodline?" Orien didn't budge, meeting her gaze unyieldingly. "I don't regret what happened. If there's a child, I'll protect it, even if I have to fight all of House Valyn." Sereth let out a soft, ambiguous laugh, reaching out to touch his chest, a gesture both gentle and loaded with meaning. "There are ways to protect the bloodline, Orien Trask. Sometimes, a new hybrid creates a new era for a house, but to be part of that, you must prove yourself worthy." Her eyes sparkled, not with hostility but with something else, possessiveness, control, perhaps even invitation. Orien felt the danger in this moment, the line between cunning and desire in her eyes blurring. But he did not waver. "I'm not a bargaining chip," he said, voice cold as steel. "You could kill me, but you'll never make me betray Aestra." Sereth stepped back, sipping her drink, her eyes regaining their frost. "Good. Remember, Orien Prime has never been a place for the weak. If you're strong enough, protect my daughter and yourself. But if you fail, I'll be the first to end it all." When Orien returned to his room, Aestra was still restless. She trembled, tears dried on her cheeks. He held her close, no words needed. In the darkness, they reached for each other, finding solace in gentle touches, kisses, and urgent breaths, a silent vow. Both knew. From now on, any mistake would be paid for in blood. Aestra whispered, lips pressed to his neck, "I'm scared, Orien. Scared of my mother, scared of myself. But I want to keep this child. I want to keep you." Orien looked deep into her eyes, hands cradling her face, whispering, "We'll keep everything. As long as you don't let go, I won't let anyone tear us apart." Outside, another great storm swept over Orien Prime. But in that room, amidst faint heartbeats and silent vows, a love defying boundaries and all schemes was truly coming alive. 3 days after that stormy night, Orien Prime seemed to shift beneath their feet. The glass corridors of the Velos Hotel were crowded with unfamiliar faces. Rumors of a biological aberration in the Valyn household slithered through every hall, secret meetings multiplied, and the suspicious stares of delegates from every species felt like daggers aimed at Aestra and Orien with each step they took. Sereth Valyn tightened security, personally organizing rounds of biometric screenings, even replacing all of her daughter's attendants, leaving only Orien with permission to approach, a gesture that felt both like a challenge and a dangerous invitation. In that stifling atmosphere, Orien and Aestra could only dare to be together in silence, every embrace haunted by the fear of discovery. Yet, it was precisely this pressure that made their emotions blaze ever hotter, desire, love, and pain mingling inextricably. Each time he touched Aestra's skin, Orien felt as if he were defying the world. She collapsed against his chest, her breath trembling, at once fragile and fierce. "If I break, don't let go," Aestra whispered between desperate lovemaking. "Aren't you afraid, facing my mother, the whole council?" Orien answered, his lips brushing her collarbone, "I am afraid, but I choose not to run." That answer became an unspoken vow, flowing through both their veins. And then the fateful day arrived. A secure message appeared on Orien's device. 9 a.m., Opal Eye Hall. The council requires a public health inspection for Lady Valyn. Don't be late. Aestra received the same message. Her face turned white, her hands clenching into fists. Orien stood behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist, pressing a kiss to the nape of her neck. "There's no turning back now," he said, his voice low and resolute. "I won't let you face this alone." She turned, her eyes glistening but now steely with resolve. "They'll do anything to tear us apart, even destroy our child or you." Let them try, we still have each other." Aestra laughed, tears falling inward. "If I could go back, I'd still choose this path. I choose you, Orien Trask." They kissed fiercely. No more denial, no more fear. Their breaths merged, hands clasped as if this one moment was the only real thing in a world of lies. Aestra's lips trembled between kisses, her body pressed close to Orien's, feeling his wild pulse, and she herself no longer had the will to resist. At Opal Eye Hall, the very heart of Orien Prime, where the highest ceremonies were held, hundreds of delegates, soldiers, and biometric scanners surrounded them. Aestra walked in beneath a gauntlet of scrutinizing eyes, her stride oddly confident. Orien stood at her side, his dark uniform stark against the sea of Lysari silver and blue robes. Sereth Valyn sat atop the highest dais, hands clasped, eyes icy sharp. She nodded, signaling the medtechs to proceed. Biolights swept over Aestra, projectors displaying floating data, her hybrid genetic signature appearing, undeniable. The hall erupted with whispers, advisors conferred, several Lysari delegates turned pale, and the human representatives could not hide a mixture of awe and admiration. A Lysari elder spoke up, voice steely. "Lady Aestra Valyn, do you have any justification for this genetic mutation? This child is not legitimate." Aestra held her head high, voice ringing clear. "No justification needed. This is my choice, and it will be the legacy of the future." Sereth rose, her voice sharp as a blade. "My daughter will not use her body for insane experiments. If you don't want your inheritance stripped, abort this child, or surrender it to the council for judgment." Orien stepped forward, eyes blazing, and the whole hall fell silent. "If you want to judge someone, judge me. This child is the result of love, not a mistake. I'll stand against all your power to protect Aestra and our child." A new wave of commotion surged. A human delegate stood to support them. Several conservative Lysari protested, but only Aestra never took her eyes from Orien. In those eyes swirled all the pain, determination, and love that would not be extinguished. Sereth strode forward, confronting them, her words biting. "If you dare to defy tradition, then prove before all of Aurion Prime who is worthy of being Valyn blood." Orien gripped Aestra's hand, looking deeply into her eyes, whispering, "I'm ready if you don't let go." Aestra clung to him, and before the crowd she declared, I choose this man, I choose our child of two bloodlines. Even if I'm cast out of Valyn, even if I must start again from nothing, I have no regrets." Orien bowed his head, pressing his lips to her brow, shocking everyone present. The hall froze for a heartbeat, then exploded into shouts and arguments. The Lysari elder demanded a bonding ritual, an ancient rite that, once performed before the council, could not be undone unless blood was shed or one withdrew. Orien nodded. "Let's do it, nothing can keep us apart." Aestra laughed, eyes glimmering with tears. "I will not back down." At the ritual table beneath ethereal light, they placed their hands on the ancestral stone, and their vows rang out in two tongues, human and Lysari. "I swear to protect you for life, even if the world turns against us. My blood joins with yours, my soul with yours. No council, no matriarch, no tradition can break this bond." A blue-silver glow flowed down Aestra's arm, slid across Orien's fingers, forming a brilliant mark, the sign of bonding, witnessed by all. The Lysari council was stunned. Sereth Valyn shook with fury, her eyes blazing with a mixture of impotence, reluctant respect, and hatred. "How dare you!" Sereth roared, but the elders only shook their heads. The bonding was absolute, unbreakable if both partners were willing. The precedent was set. No one dared take it away. After the ritual, Aestra and Orien returned to their private quarters. Aestra collapsed onto the bed, tears streaming, not weakness but release. Orien sat beside her, holding her close, hand gently on her waist, kissing her lips, her neck, her shoulders, each kiss laden with gratitude, liberation, and a new promise for the future. Aestra looked up, her voice hoarse through laughter and tears. "I just gambled everything, power, family, but for the first time I feel free." Orien whispered, hand caressing her back. "You have me, you have our child, we've made our own family." She wrapped her arms around his neck, drawing him down, their mouths meeting in the kiss of two truly free souls. They made love again, no longer trembling, no longer afraid, only sighs and waves cresting, until they lay exhausted on the white sheets, sunlight streaming over their entwined bodies, marking the dawn of a new era, even as storms raged outside. That night, Sereth stood alone at the window, gazing down at the square. Her eyes were ice, but deep inside there was fear. Fear of tradition erased, fear of lost power, and a grudging respect for the daughter who had dared to live differently. She reminded herself she still had cards to play, but tonight she had to accept. Valyn had changed, history had turned its page. Aurion Prime entered a rare cold spring. The city was awash with the silvery blossoms of Lysari flowers blooming along the boulevards, signaling a cycle of renewal. But on the top floor of the Velos Hotel, the air was thick with suspense, anxiety, and hope. Aestra Valyn, a noblewoman once imprisoned by tradition, was now preparing for the most important moment of her life. to give birth to the first child of two bloodlines, in the midst of countless threats and prejudice. Orien Trask never left her side during the final weeks of pregnancy. He brushed aside all caution, disregarded every law, and remained beside her always, becoming her living fortress, no matter the warnings or the cold indifference from the conservative Lysari. At night he held her in his arms, feeling every tiny kick from the life growing within, whispering stories about his distant Earth, simple things, the blue sky, the sound of rain, the taste of toasted bread and hot coffee. Every time Aestra smiled, tears streaming down her face from emotion, because she knew she was no longer alone. Finally, the day of birth arrived. Everything unfolded in tense silence. The birthing room was tightly isolated, Sereth Valyn personally overseeing, Lysari medics and a single Earth doctor allowed to assist. Outside, the Lysari Council waited, unable to hide their restlessness or doubt. Some eyes seemed to wish for failure, wanting proof that this hybrid would be nothing but an aberration, a danger, a mistake to be erased from history. But Orien let no one cross the threshold. He stood outside the delivery room, hands clenched white, heart pounding wildly as he heard Aestra's quiet moans, sometimes sharp cries of pain. The door cracked open only for her mother's soothing whispers, then closed again to shut out all the pressure from outside power. Time stretched agonizingly, each second elongated. Orien closed his eyes, taking a deep breath, recalling every time he had held Aestra through her nighttime fears, every gentle reassurance he had given. You are not alone. Now he repeated that to himself. At last a small sound came from within, the strong, shrill cry of a newborn. The door swung open and a Lysari medic stepped out, eyes a mixture of shock and relief. The child is healthy. One eye is silver, one the blue of earth. Its hair shines like the first light of spring. Orien didn't wait for permission. He rushed into the room. Aestra lay there, hair matted with sweat, her face exhausted but her eyes blazing as never before. She cradled the baby, her lips trembling. When she saw Orien, she smiled, eyes sparkling with tears. "Would you like to hold our child?" Orien bent down, hands trembling as he took the tiny infant. The child opened its eyes to look at its father, a small hand touching his chest, and instinctively gripping his finger tightly. Not a single Lysari made a sound. Even Sereth stood silent, her gaze complicated, unreadable. Aestra placed her hand on Orien's, whispering for the three of them alone. "Our family, no matter what the world outside says, is real." The event shook the entire Lysari Council. People came to see the child as a miracle, an anomaly, or perhaps a threat. The press on Aurion Prime exploded with headlines. First hybrid of House Valyn, a new future or a disaster. Some delegates proposed taking the child for study and tests, but Aestra declared before the entire council, "This is my child, not an experiment. If anyone wants to touch it, they must go through me and its father." Orien stood at her side, arms shielding them, his gaze unwavering. "I've survived battlefields. No one should think they can take my child without paying in blood." No one dared to step forward. Sereth Valyn, the most powerful woman among the Lysari, stepped back for the first time. She stood before her daughter, her grandchild, and the man who had shattered all her plans for control. "You have chosen the hardest path," she said, her voice raspy, "but perhaps also the only path worthy of a new era. From today, this child bears the name Valyn, is protected by House Valyn, so long as you never betray your own courage." Aestra no longer wept, only nodded. Orien looked at Sereth, his hatred gone, replaced by vigilance and a quiet sense of gratitude. "We will never do anything to shame our child," he said. Sereth nodded, turning away, her silver cloak sweeping across the cold stone, blending into the crowd of bewildered Lysari who now parted before her. They knew, at this moment, history had changed, and there was no going back. A few months later, in the small apartment on the highest floor of the Velos Hotel, Early spring sunlight filtered through the curtains, shining over 3 bodies curled together on a wide bed. The child lay in the middle, small hands clutching its parents, face peaceful, eyes half closed as if dreaming of a world without boundaries. Orien woke first, gently brushing his child's hair, then quietly looking over at Aestra. She still showed traces of fatigue, but the smile in her sleep was sweet. He leaned down to kiss her gently, whispering, "We did it." Aestra opened her eyes, smiling softly, wrapping her arms around his neck to pull him close. "It's not just survival, it's a new beginning. I never knew what freedom was until you laid your hand on my belly for the first time." Orien laughed, pressing his forehead to hers, sliding down to kiss her shoulder, her collarbone, his hand following her familiar curves. She no longer hesitated, no longer feared. The baby stirred, making them both laugh, and together they gently rolled to embrace their child between them, as if in a quiet ritual marking this new start. Amid gentle touches and soft kisses, they were no longer just two who defied tradition, but the first of a new generation, free, brave, and no longer afraid to love. Outside the window, Aurion Prime still buzzed with debate, new rituals, and never-ending schemes for power. But in that small room, all that existed was love, life, hope, and a peace the 3 had never dared to dream of before. Orien drew back the curtain, looking out over Lysari Boulevard, where silver flowers still bloomed. He wrapped his arm around Aestra, whispering in her ear, "Do you regret any of it?" Aestra shook her head, eyes shining with light and tears. "If I could do it again, I'd still choose you. And if this world is not yet kind enough, we'll take our child even further until no one remembers what difference ever was." Orien smiled, nodding, holding his wife and child tightly. "This family is ours, and no one, nothing can ever take it away from us again."